Over the past few days I've used my Super Meteor 650 extensively in different riding conditions. It equates to about 7 hours riding and about 200 miles on various roads, including motorways, country roads, in slow traffic and stop-start traffic in central London. I have a pretty good idea now of how the bike handles. The bike is heading towards 1300 miles and I'm loving how it handles and rides. Some of the riding I did for this test was off camera. Other bits are caught on camera and have been uploaded to this channel. Also, I did one trip which had an extended period of being in the saddle for 3 hours continuously in various conditions, and totaled about 5 hours riding on that day. I can now talk for the first time about riding the bike for more than 40 minutes to 1 hour at a time, and give an indication of how it would be for touring. So I would like to share a bit about these experiences. Some of this builds on previous videos I've done talking about the Super Meteor. I will link to those at appropriate times in the top right corner. Other sections offer new information, updates, or in the case of one section, I completely change my view. This video will be broken up into chapters, but you don't have to follow it through sequentially. As C.S. Lewis said, sensible people skip freely when they come to a chapter which they find is going to be no use to them. You can view them in any order. Skip a bit that doesn't interest you, skip to a bit that does, or come back to a section later. I have merely presented the information in the order I thought about it. This may not be the best order for everyone. I won't say too much about looks, as they are subjective. Everyone will have their own take on what the bike looks like, colour options, etc. But to me it is a fine example of a modern take on a classic British bike. While it deviates from being a true classic by adding modern features, they enhance, not detract from the classic bike feel in my opinion. The alloy wheels are nice without being overboard. Having modern features like ABS and electronic start add convenience and safety. But the bike has little design features which hark back to the classic Royal Enfields, while still maintaining its own unique modern character. But anyway, you're not going to buy a bike you don't like the looks of, so if you're watching this and you probably like the looks already and want to know how it handles and performs, so we'll get straight into that. The front suspension I have no issues with. The rear suspension, the more I use it for longer journeys, the more I see why everyone changes it. It isn't that great. A bump in the road really jolts your back and can send you flying out of the seat and back down with a thud. I hadn't had a problem on the roads I was using it on in Essex, but further infield in London, some of the bumps on the A13 and the speed humps were quite large and were horrendous for the ride comfort. I would definitely upgrade them for a long tour. The standard shocks are twin shocks with 101mm of travel and 5 preload settings. The front are upside down Showa 43mm forks. I have the preload on setting 3 at the moment, as I'm a larger gentleman, but having lost some weight recently I noticed on the roads I ride on it isn't as good as it was. Maybe I'll have to try setting 2 or 4 to see if it either improves it again. I even noticed watching one of my videos back, footage was a little more blurry and shaky in places. Perhaps they have changed and loosened up as the miles rack up, or perhaps I'm just driving on worse roads. Anyway, I wouldn't like to be on a very bad bumpy road. I think I'd get off and push the bike. The adjustment for the rear shocks is easy enough. The bike needs to be on the centre stand. The handbook recommends you use one of the Allen keys with a larger tube part fitted over, and then you insert it into the shock and twist it to your desired level. I'm sure any Allen key or bit of metal that fitted in the hole would do, as long as it gives you enough leverage. It is quite tight in there with the panniers on, but it is doable with some effort, and at some point I'm going to record a video to show you that it can be done. It isn't often you change suspension settings anyway, only if you load the bike up for a tour or have a pillion passenger on. Apart from that, you are probably going to keep them in position 1 or 2 long term. There are plenty of aftermarket upgrade options about though. It is just going to be a hassle to change them. It is perhaps the one thing that lets down the ride quality of the bike, and it doesn't seem to be just limited to Super Meteor, but all the 650 models. It would be nice to have better shocks from the factory. In terms of keeping the tyres in contact with the road though, and riding along normally, they fulfil their purpose. Just any sort of bump or hump isn't going to be your friend. I will deal with these two together as there isn't a lot to say really. The bike has adequate stopping power at all speeds. I have never felt like I wasn't going to stop or I was going to overshoot a corner. The brakes are Bybury brakes, which is basically Brembo but made in India. It also has ABS, but I haven't activated it yet in the wet, dry or slippery conditions. The bike has a 320mm front disc and a 300mm rear disc with twin piston calipers all round. The stopping power is perfectly fine for this bike. There's no need in my opinion for larger pistons or dual discs. The tyres at 1300 miles are holding up well. They grip the road and give me confidence that I'm not going to slide off the road when cornering or it is a bit damp. I've used them all over winter in wet, dry, icy conditions. I didn't use them in the snow, but they're perfectly fine. They grip the road, they give me confidence. I cannot speak to how long they will last, but they seem to be doing a good enough job in all conditions. The front is a 100 by 90 19-inch tyre, and the rear is a 150 80 16-inch tyre. The brand is Seat, a company which started life as an Italian one but is now Indian owned. I don't know how hard it will be to find replacement tyres, or if the options are limited. The Keyway V-Cruise 125 certainly was a struggle. I'm sure the dealer will have no problem finding more Seat tyres though. Apart from that, there is nothing special or interesting to note. They do their job and allow the bike to be ridden in a sporty yet safe way when needed. They handle perfectly fine in the wet, as long as you respect the conditions and don't drive like a maniac, and they have kept me upright and on the road in all weather conditions. On my recent trip, the engine ran faultlessly for 3 hours non-stop. It coped at slow speed and high speed. Sitting in traffic, you could feel the heat coming off it, but it wasn't excessive and showed no signs of overheating or suffering performance issues. As the bike has gone from about 1,000 miles towards 1,300 miles, it feels much more alive, much like the Shotgun 650 I rode, which had nearly 2,000 miles on the clock. I guess everything has settled, and I've also gotten used to the bike and what it is capable of, but it is such a joy to ride. The engine is a parallel twin, oil and air cooled engine. It is 649 cc's, producing 47 brake horsepower and about 52 newton meters of torque. Some believe this bike is underpowered, but after trying it out, I think it is fine for the roads of Britain and the average user. I personally don't want a sports bike, but I understand the argument some put forward that if you had a pillion passenger on tour, it would struggle a bit. But there are always ways to get more power out of a bike through aftermarket solutions, if that is your goal. In its stock configuration though, I have no complaints. It handles traffic, city riding, motorways and country roads with no issues, and can move my large frame along with enough oomph to make the experience fun when it needs to be. It returns about 50 miles to the gallon, but to be honest I don't really keep track of it that much. The tank never seems to hold a full amount as I normally fill it up when it is on the side stand. This hasn't helped in getting an exact figure, but I didn't buy it to worry about fuel economy. On tour I would be stopping about every 150 miles to fill up, which would be about a tank with a small amount in reserve to find a fuel station. This would give about 2 to 2.5 hours riding on national speed roads, or a bit longer in towns and cities, by which time you're probably ready for a stretch and refreshments anyway. The sound the bike makes is nice from its twin exhausts, but it would be nicer to have a slightly louder, deeper burble to the pipes. Aftermarket options exist, and I know Royal Enfield has sound regulations to adhere to, but you want a bike that sounds the part as well as looks the part. It isn't overly bad, just when cruising along there is an underwhelming amount of sound. But when you open the throttle up, it makes a decent enough sound. The gear change is generally smooth. It can be a bit clunky at times, and often it finds a false neutral. It also has a quirk of getting stuck in second and not wanting to find first, no matter how much you press the lever down. It is a 6-speed transmission and does a good job. There is no rev counter on the dash, but I don't have a problem with that. You can hear and feel when it is time to shift. And there is a little Eco logo that appears and disappears on the speedo, which gives a good indication of when it is time to shift the gear. Apart from the annoyance of it sometimes still being in gear when it says neutral, or not wanting to shift into first and having a steadied and controlled start in second, there isn't too much else to report about the gearbox. The chain is easy enough to clean and wax. I'm getting about 200 to 250 miles before I have to do it again at the moment, but there's been a lot of rain and salt around, being, winter. But the weather may bring a bit longer periods, and I'm almost out of the cleaner and wax that I purchased cheaply, so I will try another brand to see if things last a bit longer. They are useful for holding small items such as security items, a drink, waterproof, but I'm not sure how practical they would be for going on tour. I'm not sure you're fitting all the clothes you need in along with a spare pair of shoes, etc. And your security items, spare oil, chain wax, little toolkit and other sundries. But for everyday use such as going to work, they are practical. The other day I had my jacket in there, a pair of trousers, a high-vis vest and a 0.8 litre bottle of drink. It was a close, tight fit, but it did eventually securely close. I'm sure I could have packed them better. I've also done it where I've had the jacket and trousers and needed a spare pair of shoes, and it can only take one shoe per pannier, or putting them both in another one, which leaves very little room for anything else. The panniers themselves are not entirely waterproof. I have taken them to the jet wash and blasted them with the jet washer at the seams. There was some light misting that got in, but it wasn't like a swimming pool in there. So on a long tour I'd say if you use waterproof liners or plastic bags or something similar, for any items of clothing or items that might get damaged such as electricals. Royal Enfield themselves do sell some waterproof liners, but they are quite expensive. I just use cheap drawstring gym bags, they seem to do the job. The design of the panniers makes them look fabulous on the bike because they have a curved profile which matches the back end of the bike. The gloss black looks nice. I've talked elsewhere about how I wish they offered colour matching choices and that perhaps the Royal Enfield logo should be gold, but these are customisation options I could do in the future if I wanted to. For now though, they look good. I think they look better than any of the aftermarket options. but they aren't the easiest to take off. I've looked at the instructions and it looks a bit fiddly, and I did try the other day, and you have to hold nuts while taking bolts off, and to pull it back in again you need some very tiny hands and good grip. But so far they have not been a problem or got in the way of me cleaning and waxing the chain or changing the preload on the suspension. I'm sure they'll have to come off at some point, say for a tyre change, but I shall study further how to take them off, maybe have a go on a fine day to see how to do it properly, and I will report back in future about taking them off. Maybe I'll do a video once I've mastered it. This was a very useful upgrade to the bike, and I'm glad it was done. Originally I was going to have my Super Meteor as a single seater by taking the pillion passenger seat part off and installing the little silver rack you can buy, but the dealer offered this model with the touring seat and backrest already fitted, so I took it, and I must say it has done wonders for my comfort levels. I haven't had a pillion on the bike yet, so I cannot comment on the experience for pillion riders or whether the backrest is useful or not, so I will stick to talking about the rider comfort. I find it very comfortable for my large frame, and certainly it's the most comfortable seat on a bike I've experienced yet. There will be more later on the comfort after a long ride, but suffice to say, I don't believe I'd have survived as long as I did on my 3-hour ride without the touring seat. I know others have had issues, such as Teacher T Thailand, now Ride with T, and he did some modifications but eventually changed to aftermarket seats. No seat is ever going to suit every person going, since we're all different sizes, shapes and weights. This is why it's so important to sit on a bike you want to buy, and ideally do an extended test ride to see if you can live with it. In the end, it is you who's going to be riding it every day, not me. So you need to be comfortable and feel at one with the bike, not just for comfort, but for safety reasons. So again, if you're going to think about these upgrades, maybe see if there is a local dealer or shop which has one that you can try and sit on. This is definitely a welcome bonus. I wasn't going to get one originally, but it came on the bike when I purchased it. I thought it would make it look too much like a scooter. However, from the first day I noticed the benefits. When I picked up the bike there was a horrible wind and rainstorm. My body stayed relatively warm and dry while the rest of me was cold and wet. When I rode the shotgun I could feel the wind blasting into my chest, and it almost pushed me backwards as I accelerated and cruised at 60 to 70 miles an hour. This doesn't happen on the Super Meteor because of the windshield. Recently I've also seen another benefit, the amount of bugs that are splattered all over it. It's annoying to clean, but it's better than blasting me at 60 miles an hour. They hurt when they hit my legs or arm, but I'm glad they aren't hitting my body, and they seem to be avoiding my helmet as well. I haven't had to clear my visor of any bugs so far, so that's a positive. Okay, the bike would probably look better without it on, but you can't argue against the benefit it provides, and it will certainly be a useful addition for longer journeys. One downside is that it seems to channel air up and towards your helmet. This can increase wind noise, and I've noticed when travelling along, sometimes my helmet seems to take a battering of wind coming up from the screen, and the camera mount on my chin has bounced about a bit. Others have noted this in their reviews of the bike, but I believe the benefits outweigh this one negative. I have used Tripper a few times now. It certainly isn't perfect and has its issues. I'm not sure though how many are the fault of Royal Enfield and how much is down to the Google Maps platform which it is using. On my last trip out to Enfield, I was using it, I noticed that there was often lag, so that you'd pass the turning you needed, leading to long periods where you were seemingly stuck driving in circles. I also noted that the roundabout numbering was odd, as it appeared to count the turning you came in on as number 1, so if you wanted the second exit, it was telling you the third or the fourth, etc. There was less of that as an issue on my long ride through London, but it still had a couple of quirks. There were a couple of roundabouts which still miscounted the exit, but I was aware this time, so didn't go wrong. On the whole, it behaved at roundabouts. I think there was only one turn also where it lagged and I missed it. The biggest problem though is when you need to do 2 turns in quick succession, such as going left then immediately right, or going slightly left then needing to get over to the far lane to swing round right. The system just isn't quick enough, and sometimes you have a confusing situation where the left and right arrows are on the screen at the same time, as it is loading the next instruction, and if you glance down quickly while riding, you can often be mistaken. Also, sometimes you have completed the first instruction, but it hasn't loaded how far until you need to do the next, like turn right, and you could easily miss it. But as it reroutes pretty quickly, even if you do miss a turning, it will get you back on route fairly quickly. An annoyance is, it doesn't know about road limitations. London has plenty. Some are limited at certain hours, so cars and bikes can't go down them, or they are bus turns only, or like one that I ended up going into was a taxi and cycles only. This can get you in a lot of bother in London, which hates the motorist and loves cameras and fines, so you have to be paying attention at all times. I would say it is a useful aid to give you the general direction to somewhere you want to go, but you have to fine tune it via road signs, intuition and common sense. The more I've used it, the easier it is to know the quirks and get around them. The thing I cannot get around, though, is how much battery is zapped from the phone. It is a ridiculous amount. In the hour of use, it took about 50% of my battery life. Now, you could hook it up to a USB cable in your side pod, but that is a silly location for it. Or you could hook it up to a battery pack in your jacket, but I suspect both methods would cause the phone to get quite hot as it's charging and being used. I still cannot understand why, since the Super Meteor has an accessory plug in the headlamp, they didn't put USB as standard somewhere near the handlebars. This is definitely an upgrade I'm going to make, and will be buying the USB system from Hitchcock Motorcycles, as it seems to be the most practical, as it is mounted to the rear of the tripper unit. The app and the unit itself are pretty good. They are simple enough to pair, and the app walks you through it, and they have produced a video which shows you exactly how to do it. I have said elsewhere though, I wish they had incorporated it into a single speed speedo tripper unit, or done like they have on the classic 650, so that the gauges don't look uneven and off centre, but that is just nitpicking from me. It is a useful feature to have. It was a feature that attracted me to do Royal Enfields originally, but it isn't one I've used as much as I thought I would. It can certainly help you in an area you don't know, get you out of a jam, but just understand it has limitations. And the best solution would be a dedicated sat-nav with Street View giving you the street names, such as mounting your mobile phone to the handlebars. If I was doing a long tour, I might be tempted to mount my phone to the handlebars and run it as a sat-nav, or at least have the Street View on displaying where to go, the street names, alongside the tripper to give a better overall idea of where I'm headed. The Super Meteor is never going to be a bike that you get your knee down to the ground as you're going round corners. However, it can take corners perfectly well at speed. I have had fun down windy country lanes on the bike, using a dab of rear brake sometimes, also leaning a bit. The bike corners perfectly fine for our roads in Britain. Not really a lot to say about it. It goes round corners. I've never felt like I was going to miss a corner, or end up in oncoming traffic, or that the bike would go straight on or slip out from underneath me and I'd end up sliding across the floor. It is a solid machine which hugs the road well. Slow stop-start traffic was easy to cope with. The bike didn't feel wobbly at slow speeds, and I could ride along at less than 5 miles an hour without feeling I was going to tip or fall. While other bikes with more neutral riding positions such as the shotgun were easier to control at slow speeds, the Super Meteor certainly isn't a struggle. I like the riding position with the forward controls. I find it gives me good balance and posture along with comfort. It allows you to paddle the bike along at slow speeds without fear of bashing your legs. And when you get going, you can lift your legs up quite easily onto the foot pegs. The bike is quite heavy, I think, and on a slight incline, paddling isn't fun. Not that you're probably going to do that, but if you're stalled or in a situation where you want to move somewhere safely or forward a bit, just be aware it is going to take a bit of effort on a slope. My drive is on an incline, and I often try to find ways to get it up into the garage without having to have the engine running at night. This includes getting off, opening the garage door, trying to push it, sometimes paddling it, and trust me, it is a lot of effort and almost futile. The only real problem I had was stopping in traffic. Not because of the brakes, but just you can't really see where the end of the front wheel is. I felt like sometimes I was going to hit a rear bumper or side of a car when I was filtering back into traffic. Now this is maybe because in Essex I haven't encountered much of a need to lane split and filter through traffic, so I'm not used to it yet. But for me it was something I found on more than one occasion being an issue. My ride across London, then up the M11 to Harlow, took 3 hours, according to the Royal Enfield Tripper app. Before that, I did about an hour of riding to get from my home in Essex down to Greenwich, where I had about a 30-minute rest at Greenwich Park. After Harlow, I rode about 40 minutes to get back home, after spending about 20 minutes there. I found the bike to be really comfortable. Being 6'2", I would have liked the seat to be a bit higher. I can see the appeal of adventure bikes, not that I like the size of them or the look of them, but they have that higher seating position. But that is just me. I found myself after about 2 hours having to stretch my back every so often and stood for a few seconds at traffic lights on a couple of occasions. At about 2.5 hours in, my bum was certainly feeling it, but this is longer than, say, my Keyway V-Cruise where I felt it within about half an hour. My bum wasn't overly sore. It isn't like I'm going to feel it sitting down for the next few days. Once I was off the bike and back to normality, the slight discomfort was gone. My legs didn't hurt at all, probably because they weren't folded up and they spent a lot of time stretched out at traffic lights or in traffic jam. At 3 hours, I was ready to get off the bike when I arrived in Harlow. When I dismounted the bike, I was glad to be off and was able to straighten up a bit. Now, I wasn't hunched over like an old person or body parts locked up. The first few steps were a bit hunched though, but after shopping for 20 minutes, I returned to the saddle and carried on home for another 40 minutes, and I wasn't in pain or discomfort. Even in a car though, I wouldn't drive for more than 2 hours non-stop without a rest to be able to stretch. I have back problems as it is, so to say the Super Meteor is a problem is unfair, as even sitting in a car I'd need to stretch and I would be a bit stiff. And I suspect any bike you need to rest or become sore and stiff. So how it compares to other bikes I don't know, but if you had to ride for 2 to 3 hours non-stop, you'd have very few aches to put you off and distract you on the Super Meteor. Overall, I was surprised at how little I did ache after 3 hours in the saddle. It certainly bodes well for going long distance touring on the bike. Here though I could plan stops, so I doubt I would go 2 to 3 hours non-stop again by choice. The riding position was very comfortable though. The touring seat allows you to sit back a bit and have sort of a lower backrest where it curves up towards the pillion seat. The forward controls means your legs are stretched and relaxed. I was surprised how much I enjoyed being on the bike for so long, as the V-Cruise being smaller was harder and I often got cramps in my legs after riding for an extended time. And other sportier bikes with a folded up foot position, I was uncomfortable from the moment I got on them. I don't want to be folded up like a pretzel. By far though, the biggest discomfort were my hands. The grips are quite hard and thin for my hands. I've said elsewhere I preferred when I had my Ultimate add-ons removable heated grips on, as they were chunkier and softer. My hands from about 20 minutes in were sore and felt a bit locked up sometimes. I hope to upgrade the grips for permanent heated grips next winter, so I will choose wisely ones that suit my needs and hopefully provide a nicer hand position and comfort for me. Elsewhere, I have done a video of the bike on the M25 motorway. Today the bike did the A13, which is similar speeds and conditions to a motorway, just a bit less traffic, as well as the M11 from London to Harlow. The bike coped fabulously with the motorway. It didn't feel out of place. It had enough power and go to overtake lorries and other traffic when needed, including being able to use the third lane. I didn't feel I was getting left behind by traffic or think that I was causing a problem. Opening the throttle, the bike would move and accelerate well in any gear from any speed. I also had enough in reserve to make sure I could avoid situations such as lorries or cars pulling in or out on me. While I wouldn't want to do long motorway journeys, as there is nothing to look at, and it isn't that fun due to the wind and noise, if you had to do a stretch of motorway, this bike would cope fine. So is it the perfect bike? Well, no. But I don't think any bike can be perfect. One size fits all, and certainly everyone has their own requirements. I said elsewhere what I would like to change about the looks for the bike. This isn't really about subjective things though. I'm trying to give an objective, this is how the bike performs as it is type review. So for me it is as close to a perfect bike for me and my needs. I would liken it to a family saloon car. Not the best car going, not the worst. Not the biggest, not the smallest. Enough room, comfort and features that you can go on a long trip, but not so large that you struggle to go short distances around town or park it in parking spaces. This is what the Super Meteor is. A mid-sized, practical cruiser which can do everything good enough. Long distance cruise, yes. Pop to the shops, yes. Weekend fun in the country lanes, yes. Dull commute to work on the motorway on Monday morning, yes. It is an all-round versatile machine which can get you to work Monday to Friday and can provide fun at the weekend. So while the looks aren't to everyone's taste nor the riding position, I think the Super Meteor is certainly worthy of consideration if you are in the market for a cruiser or a bike to have a bit of fun on. I hope this video has been some help to you. Let me know if you have any questions regarding this bike, or let me know what you think about Super Meteor 650 in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching, stay safe and have fun, and I'll see you next time.